What happens when one of Hollywood's most iconic stars sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to find herself facing an unexpected interrogation that spirals completely out of control? Today we're diving into one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history, where Pamela Anderson found herself in a heated battle of words with Joy Behar that left everyone in the studio stunned. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story gets more intense with every passing minute. The atmosphere in the View studio was electric as Pamela Anderson walked onto the set, her signature confidence radiating as she settled into the guest chair. The co-hosts had been promoting this interview for weeks, promising viewers an intimate conversation about her latest projects and personal journey. What nobody anticipated was how quickly things would take a dramatic turn. Joy Behar opened with what seemed like standard pleasantries, but there was something in her tone that suggested she had a different agenda. "Pamela, it's wonderful to have you here. You know, I've been watching your career for decades, and I have to ask, do you ever look back and wonder if some of your choices were, well, let's say questionable?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Pamela's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Joy, I think every person looks back on their life and sees moments they might handle differently. But I'm proud of the path I've taken and the woman I've become." "That's very diplomatic," Joy replied, her voice carrying a sharp edge that made the other co-hosts exchange glances. "But let's be honest here. Your career was built on a certain image, wasn't it? The whole Baywatch thing, the magazine covers, the relationships that seemed to dominate headlines more than your actual work. Don't you think that set a problematic example for young women?" The studio fell silent. This wasn't the lighthearted interview anyone had expected. Pamela's posture straightened, and for the first time, viewers could see a flash of irritation cross her face. "I think you're reducing my entire career to a very narrow perspective, Joy. Yes, I was on Baywatch, and yes, I posed for magazines. But I've also been an activist for animal rights for over 2 decades. I've written books, I've produced content, and I've raised 2 wonderful sons." Joy wasn't backing down. She leaned forward, her expression growing more confrontational. "But come on, Pamela, you can't deny that your primary claim to fame was your appearance, not your activism. The red swimsuit, the blonde hair, the whole sex symbol persona. That's what people remember, isn't it? What people remember and what defines me are 2 very different things." Pamela shot back, her voice rising slightly. "And I find it interesting that you're sitting here questioning my choices when you've spent your entire career making jokes about people's personal lives and appearances. At least I've used my platform to fight for causes I believe in." The tension in the room was palpable. The other co-hosts looked uncomfortable, clearly not expecting this level of hostility. Joy's eyes narrowed, and she pressed on with renewed intensity. "That's a fair point, but let's talk about those causes. Your animal rights activism is admirable, sure, but don't you think your methods were sometimes more about getting attention than creating real change? The PETA campaigns, the publicity stunts, it all seemed very calculated to keep you in the headlines." Pamela's hands clenched in her lap, and viewers could see her struggling to maintain her composure. "Calculated? Joy, I've dedicated my life to protecting animals because I genuinely care about their welfare. Every campaign I did, every event I attended, every dollar I donated came from a place of real passion. If that kept me in the headlines, then at least those headlines were about something meaningful instead of celebrity gossip and petty drama." "Meaningful headlines," Joy repeated with a sardonic laugh. "Like when you married Tommy Lee after knowing him for 4 days, or when you had that very public relationship with a series of men who seemed more interested in your image than your activism. Those headlines were about meaningful causes." The question hit like a slap. Pamela's face flushed, and for a moment, she looked genuinely hurt. "My personal relationships have nothing to do with my professional work or my activism. The fact that you're bringing up my marriages and relationships shows that you're more interested in tabloid gossip than having a real conversation about my career and accomplishments." Joy shrugged, showing no signs of backing down. "Your personal life became your brand, Pamela. You can't separate the 2 when you've spent decades living your life in the public eye. Every relationship, every breakup, every reconciliation was front-page news. You courted that attention, and now you want to act like it's irrelevant." "I never courted that attention," Pamela replied, her voice growing stronger and more defiant. "The media made choices about what to focus on, and apparently, you've made the same choice today. Instead of talking about my work with PETA, my books, my production company, or my advocacy for victims of abuse, you want to rehash decades-old gossip about my love life." The other co-hosts were visibly squirming in their seats. One of them tried to interject with a gentler question, but Joy cut her off with a wave of her hand. No, I think this is important. Pamela, you say you're an advocate for abuse victims, but your own relationships were often very public and very volatile. Don't you think that sends mixed messages?" Pamela's eyes flashed with anger. "Mixed messages? Joy, I survived abuse, And I've worked to help other women escape similar situations. The fact that you're using my personal trauma as ammunition in this interview is absolutely disgusting. You're supposed to be a journalist, not a vulture feeding off people's pain. I'm asking legitimate questions about public behavior. Joy fired back. When you live your life in the spotlight and profit from that exposure, you open yourself up to scrutiny. That's the price of fame, and you knew that going in. The price of fame shouldn't include having my personal trauma dissected on national television by someone who clearly has an agenda. Pamela replied, her voice trembling with barely controlled fury. I came here thinking we were going to have a respectful conversation about my current projects and my life's work. Instead, you've turned this into some kind of character assassination. Joy's expression hardened at Pamela's accusation. Character assassination. I'm simply asking questions that any responsible journalist would ask. If you can't handle basic scrutiny about your very public life choices, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. The words hit Pamela like a physical blow. She sat back in her chair, momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity of Joy's response. Basic scrutiny? You've spent the last 10 minutes attacking everything from my career to my marriages to my activism. This isn't journalism, Joy. This is a hit job, and I'm starting to wonder why. Maybe because some of us remember when female celebrities actually had talent beyond looking good in a swimsuit. Joy shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. Maybe because some of us are tired of watching women reduce themselves to sex objects and then claim they're feminists when it's convenient. The other co-hosts looked horrified. One of them tried desperately to redirect the conversation. Maybe we should talk about Pamela's new book project, she suggested weakly. But Joy was on a roll now, and there was no stopping her. Actually, let's talk about that book. Isn't it convenient that after decades of trading on your looks, you suddenly want to be taken seriously as an author? What's next? Are you going to tell us you're a serious actress too? Pamela's face went white with rage. You know what, Joy? I've written 3 books, and they've all been well received by critics and readers alike. But you wouldn't know that, because you're too busy making assumptions based on 30-year-old photographs. You want to talk about women reducing themselves? Look in the mirror. You've built your entire career on tearing other women down. I've built my career on comedy and political commentary, Joy retorted. I don't need to take my clothes off to get attention. The studio gasped audibly. Even the camera operators seemed shocked by the viciousness of the exchange. Pamela stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. That's it. I'm done. You're a bitter, jealous woman who gets her kicks from humiliating guests on national television. Sit down, Pamela, Joy commanded, her voice cold and authoritative. We're not finished here. Oh, we're definitely finished, Pamela replied, her voice shaking with fury. I've sat here and listened to you insult my career, my relationships, my activism, and my intelligence. I've watched you twist every accomplishment I've ever had into something cheap and meaningless. I won't sit here for one more second and let you continue this disgusting display. Joy leaned back in her chair with a smug expression. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone asks you real questions, you run away. It's the same pattern you've followed your whole life. When things get difficult, you bolt. Pamela stopped in her tracks, turning back to face Joy with fire in her eyes. Real questions. You call this real journalism? Joy, I've been interviewed by Barbara Walters, Oprah Winfrey, and some of the most respected journalists in the world. None of them felt the need to attack my character or mock my life choices to get a good story. That's because they're professionals, and you're just a bully with a microphone. Professional journalists ask tough questions, Joy replied, refusing to back down. They don't just lob softballs and let celebrities promote their latest projects without any scrutiny. If you can't handle that level of questioning, then maybe you should stick to entertainment shows where they'll just fawn over you. Tough questions. Pamela laughed bitterly. You haven't asked me a single question about my actual work. You haven't mentioned my foundation, my documentary work, my environmental activism, or any of the legitimate causes I support. All you've done is make snide comments about my appearance and my love life. That's not journalism, that's tabloid garbage. Joy's co-hosts were frantically trying to signal for a commercial break, but the confrontation was too intense to stop. You want to talk about your foundation? Joy said with mock interest. Fine, let's talk about how much of the money actually goes to the causes you claim to support versus how much goes to maintaining your lifestyle and keeping you in the public eye. The accusation was so outrageous that Pamela actually staggered backward. Are you accusing me of stealing from charity? Are you seriously suggesting that I'm using nonprofit organizations as some kind of personal slush fund? Joy, that's not just insulting, it's potentially libelous. I'm asking questions about transparency and accountability, Joy replied smoothly. Questions that donors and supporters have a right to have answered. But once again, instead of providing answers, you're getting defensive and trying to shut down the conversation. Pamela's hands were shaking now. Whether from anger or shock, it was hard to tell. I'm getting defensive because you're making baseless accusations about my integrity and my commitment to causes I've supported for over 20 years. You're not a journalist, Joy, you're a character assassin. And you're doing it on live television because you know I can't properly defend myself in this format. You're defending yourself just fine, Joy said with a cruel smile. You're showing everyone exactly who you really are. When the cameras are rolling and the questions get hard, the real Pamela Anderson comes out, and she's not the sweet, misunderstood victim you pretend to be in your interviews and your books. The words hung in the air like poison. Pamela stared at Joy for a long moment, her face cycling through emotions of hurt, anger, and finally, cold determination. You know what the difference is between us, Joy? I've spent my life trying to make the world a better place, even when it cost me personally. You've spent your life trying to tear people down for sport. History will remember which one of us made a positive impact. History will remember me as someone who asked the questions other people were afraid to ask, Joy replied, and it will remember you as a cautionary tale about what happens when women mistake notoriety for accomplishment. The cruelty of the statement seemed to shock even Joy's co-hosts. One of them finally found her voice. Joy, I think maybe we should take a break. And no, Pamela interrupted, her voice now deadly calm. No breaks, no timeouts. Joy wants to play hardball, so let's play hardball. You want to talk about cautionary tales? Let's talk about yours. You're a 70-something-year-old woman who gets her thrills from bullying guests half your age. You've turned mean-spiritedness into an art form, and you've convinced yourself that it makes you clever. Joy's confident demeanor flickered for the first time. I'm a comedian and a political commentator. I make observations about public figures. If you can't handle that, you're a has-been who peaked decades ago, and now you're desperately trying to stay relevant by creating controversy. Pamela cut her off. The saddest part is that you actually had talent once. I've seen your old stand-up routines, your early television work. You were funny without being cruel. But somewhere along the way, you decided that being mean was easier than being clever, and now this is all you have left. The studio fell into a stunned silence after Pamela's devastating assessment of Joy's career. For the first time in the entire interview, Joy seemed genuinely rattled, her usual quick wit apparently deserting her in the face of such a direct and personal attack. Her co-host sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this unprecedented confrontation play out to its conclusion. Joy's face had gone pale, but she quickly recovered her composure, though her voice carried a new edge of desperation. Well, that's rich, coming from someone whose biggest accomplishment was running in slow motion on a beach. At least I've never had to rely on my body to make a living. There it is, Pamela said, pointing directly at Joy with a look of triumph mixed with disgust. There's the real Joy Behar, a woman so insecure about her own appearance and her own choices that she has to tear down other women to feel better about herself. You think because you never posed for magazines or wore a red swimsuit that makes you morally superior. It just makes you bitter. Joy's hands clenched on the desk in front of her. I'm not bitter, I'm realistic. I'm calling out the hypocrisy of someone who built a career on objectification and now wants to be taken seriously as an intellectual and an activist. You can't have it both ways, Pamela. Why can't I have it both ways? Pamela shot back, her voice rising to match Joy's intensity. Why does the fact that I was proud of my body and my sexuality automatically disqualify me from having a brain or caring about important causes? That kind of thinking is exactly what's wrong with how women are treated in this industry and in society. You're perpetuating the same misogynistic attitudes that have held women back for generations. Joy laughed harshly. Don't lecture me about misogyny. I've been fighting for women's rights since before you were born. I've been in this business for 40 years, and I've earned my place through talent and hard work, not by taking my clothes off. And there you go again, Pamela said, shaking her head in amazement. You keep coming back to that same tired point as if it invalidates everything else I've ever done. Joy, I've raised millions of dollars for animal welfare. I've testified before Congress, I've produced documentaries that have changed minds and saved lives. But all you can see is a woman in a swimsuit because that's all you want to see. The other co-hosts were making increasingly frantic gestures to their producers, clearly desperate for someone to end this confrontation before it got even worse. But both women seemed locked in a battle that neither was willing to lose. Joy leaned forward aggressively. You know what I see? I see someone who's spent her entire adult life seeking validation from men and from the media. And now that she's older and that attention is fading, she's desperately trying to reinvent herself as something she never was. An intellectual, an activist, a serious person, but you can't escape your past, Pamela. That's who you are. The words seemed to hit Pamela like a physical blow. For a moment, her composure cracked and viewers could see genuine pain flash across her face. But instead of breaking down, she straightened her shoulders and looked Joy directly in the eye with a strength that seemed to surprise everyone in the studio. You want to know who I really am, Joy? I'm a woman who survived childhood abuse and used her strength to build a life for herself and her children. I'm someone who took the opportunities that were available to me and parlayed them into a platform that I've used to help others. I'm a mother who raised 2 sons to be good men, in spite of having their family life dissected in the tabloids. I'm an activist who has dedicated decades of her life to protecting animals who can't protect themselves. Joy opened her mouth to interrupt, but Pamela held up her hand and continued with growing intensity. But most importantly, I'm a woman who refuses to be ashamed of who I am or how I got here. You can sit there and judge my choices all you want, but at the end of the day, I've lived my life authentically, and I've used whatever gifts I had to make a positive difference in the world. Can you say the same? Joy's face was now flushed with anger and what looked like embarrassment. Don't you dare question my contributions or my authenticity. I've been speaking truth to power and fighting for progressive causes since when, Pamela interrupted, since it became profitable, since it gave you a platform to attack people you don't like. Joy, your idea of activism is making jokes about politicians on a daytime talk show. My activism involves getting my hands dirty, spending my own money, and putting my reputation on the line for causes I believe in. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch. Joy stood up from her chair, her face contorted with rage. How dare you minimize what I do? How dare you suggest that my work isn't legitimate? I've used my platform to educate people, to challenge injustice, to hold powerful people accountable. You've used your platform to bully guests and make cruel jokes. Pamela fired back, also rising from her chair. You've turned The View into your personal playground where you can settle scores and work out your personal issues at other people's expense. This interview is the perfect example. Instead of having a professional conversation, you've spent the entire time trying to humiliate me. Joy's co-hosts were now openly pleading with both women to calm down, but their words fell on deaf ears. The 2 women stood facing each other across the coffee table like prize-fighters in a ring, neither willing to back down. You came on this show knowing what kind of questions we ask, Joy said through gritted teeth. If you expected a puff piece, you should have gone on a different program. This is what real journalism looks like. This is what a pathetic attempt at character assassination looks like. Pamela replied coldly, and the fact that you're calling it journalism is an insult to every real journalist who has ever done this job with integrity and professionalism. Joy's mask of composure finally slipped completely. Get out, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Get out of this studio right now. I'm done wasting my time with someone who can't handle honest questions about her life choices. Pamela stared at her for a long moment, then began gathering her purse and jacket with deliberate calm. Don't worry, Joy, I was already leaving. I have better things to do than sit here and listen to a bitter old woman take out her frustrations on me. Bitter old woman, Joy shrieked, her professional facade completely abandoned. Now, at least I never had to marry a rock star to get famous. At least I never had to rely on scandals and sex tapes to stay in the headlines. The mention of personal scandals seemed to be the final straw for Pamela. She turned back one last time, her eyes blazing with fury. And at least I never had to tear down other women to feel good about myself. At least I never built a career on cruelty and mean-spiritedness. When people remember this interview, Joy, they're not going to remember your tough questions or your journalistic integrity. They're going to remember a sad, insecure woman who couldn't resist taking cheap shots at someone who had the courage to live life on her own terms. With that, Pamela Anderson walked off the set of The View, leaving behind a stunned studio audience and a host who had finally met her match. The cameras continued rolling as Joy sat back down, visibly shaken by the encounter, while her co-host struggled to regain control of what had become one of the most explosive interviews in daytime television history. The confrontation revealed something deeper than just a clash between 2 strong-willed women. It exposed the complex dynamics of how women in the entertainment industry are judged, the double standards they face, and the ways in which success can breed resentment and jealousy even among those who should be allies. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Have you ever seen 2 celebrities go at each other this intensely on live television? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more explosive celebrity stories that you won't believe actually happened.